الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So on Thursday we talked about the ruling of Salât al-Jumu'ah, or the Ghusl before Salât al-Jumu'ah. And today we're going to continue on that topic. We're discussing whether the Ghusl on Jumu'ah is for the Salât or if it's for the day. So does it relate specifically for the Salât, or does it relate to the day of Jumu'ah? And what is the point, or what is the benefits of knowing that difference? So on this topic, there's three opinions on this issue. The first is that the Ghusl is for the Salât, so it's relating to the Salât, not the day, and that it starts after Fajr. So the person can't do it in the night. They can only do it on after Fajr enters because it's the actual daytime. And this is the opinion of the Mâlikiyyah and the Shâfi'îyyah and the Hanâbilah. So they say that, so there's two things here. First of all, when does it start and what is it related to? It starts on Fajr and it's related to the Salât. So meaning if the person missed it, prayed Jumu'ah and still hadn't performed the Ghusl, then they would have missed the time and they've missed the Sunnah of that act or the obligation of that act. The second opinion is that it's also for the Salât, but it has to be done before the Salât, meaning that the person has to go to Jumu'ah on that Ghusl still. So meaning that if they did it after Fajr and then nullified their wudu or something like this, then they would have to perform the Ghusl again. And that's the opinion of Abû Yûsuf al-Ansari, who was from the main imams of the Ahnâf. And both of these opinions, or the scholars who held both of these opinions, take or use very similar evidence. So the first hadith that they use is the one we talked about on Thursday, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِذَا جَاءَ أَحَدُكُمْ إِلَى الْجُمُعَةِ فَلْيَغْتَسِلْ, or that if any of you comes to the Jumu'ah, then he must perform Ghusl. So they say that here it's relating to the Salât itself. If one of you comes to the Jumu'ah, then let him do this. So it's directly related to the Salât. It has nothing, and there's nothing in this hadith relating it to the day of Jumu'ah. And that hadith is agreed upon. So it's narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. They also mention the hadith from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, مَنْ اغْتَسَلَ يَوْمَ الْجُمُعَةِ غُسْلَ الْجَنَابَةِ ثُمَّ رَاحَ فَكَأَنَّمَا قَرَّبَ بَدَنَهُ ومن راح في الساعة الثانية فكأنما قرب بقرة ومن راح في الثالثة فكأنما قرب كبشا أقرا. Or that Abu Hurairah narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever performs ghusl on Friday, like the ghusl of janaba, so meaning there's no difference between the two, then he goes early for the prayer, it is as if he had sacrificed a camel. So he gets the rewards of sacrificing a camel. And whoever goes in the second hour, so meaning a little bit later, then it's as if he has sacrificed a cow. And whoever goes in the third hour, then it's as if he has sacrificed a horned ram. وَمَنْ رَاحَ فِي السَّاعَةِ الرَّابِعَةِ فَكَأَنَّمَا قَرَّبَ دَجَاجَةً وَمَنْ رَاحَ فِي السَّاعَةِ الْخَامِسَةِ فَكَأَنَّمَا قَرَّبَ بِيضَةً فَإِذَا خَرَجَ الْإِمَامِ حَضَرَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةِ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الذِّكْرِ. Or that then the Prophet ﷺ continued with that, which means, and whoever goes in the fourth hour, it's as if he has sacrificed a hen. And whoever goes in the fifth hour, it's as if he has offered an egg. And then when the Imam comes out, the angels present themselves to listen to the dhikr, so to listen to the khutbah. And this hadith is also authentic. It's narrated by Muslim and others as well. So they say here that it's related to the Salât, because whoever performs ghusl like the ghusl of janaba then goes to the Salât. So it has nothing to do with the day, it's related specifically to the Salât. So if someone had done it after, then they obviously wouldn't be following or falling under this hadith. Then they mention the hadith or the story from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu with Uthman ibn Affan that we talked about last Thursday, which was that Uthman came late to Salât al-Jumu'ah after the khutbah had begun, and Umar stopped him and said, what is it, or what time is it, meaning essentially, or what hour is it right now? So then Uthman radiallahu anhu explained that he was late in getting to the Jumu'ah to the point that he went home and then made wudu and left right away. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, which means, and only wudu as well, so meaning not only are you late, but you only performed wudu, even though you know that the Prophet ﷺ commanded ghusl for Jumu'ah. And this hadith is obviously authentic as well, we talked about it before. So the way they use this is they say, had it been related to the day, not for the Salât, then what could Uthman have replied with, or what would be the problem with what Umar had said, if it was related to the day and not the Salât?
You could have said I performed ghusl earlier on, so like I already completed my duty for the day, I should be doing wudu.
Well, no, because he said I was only able to make wudu. So he's saying he didn't make ghusl.
Or I can perform ghusl afterwards.
I can perform it after, exactly. So if you have all the way, so you have from after Jumu'ah to Asr, and then Asr till Maghrib, you have lots of time still. He could have easily said, well, I'm going to go perform it after. Or Umar wouldn't have asked him about it to begin with, because if it wasn't related to that. So that's the way that hadith is used. According to that opinion, yeah. No, the other one is that has to be, you're on that ghusl when you go to the Jumu'ah.
No, but the starting time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess, yeah, but
So
whether someone would be able to...
Yani the night. Because I need today, so it'd have to be after Maghrib.
Well, the people who say it's after Maghrib is either the ones who say it's related to the whole day, so meaning you could do it the night before, or you could do it after Jumu'ah as well, or they say that you could go as long as you go to the Jumu'ah and that ghusl. So if you did it the night before and you held that up until Jumu'ah, then that would be okay, I guess, if someone was able to do that. Then they also mention some other hadith that relate directly to the Salât, that mention of going to the Salât, or the hadith that we talked about last week with from Aisha radiallahu anha, that the people came to the Jumu'ah and they would come from far away and they would get dirty and they would smell, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, if only you had made ghusl for this day of yours. So the way they use it is they say that it was the people coming to the Jumu'ah, so if they had performed ghusl before this, then they wouldn't be in this state when all the Muslims were gathering together. The third opinion, like we said, is that it relates to the day. So it's nothing to do with Salât al-Jumu'ah, it has to do with Jumu'ah itself. So whether you perform it after Maghrib the night before, whether you pray Jumu'ah and then perform it, they say that if it's related to the day, so as long as on Jumu'ah you perform ghusl, then this would be sufficient and you would either be fulfilling the sunnah or the obligation. And that's the opinion of Imam Ibn Hazm, as well as some of the Ahnâf. So what they say for this is that the hadith from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu that we talked about last week, that the Prophet ﷺ said, الغسل يوم الجمعة واجب على كل مسلم أو على كل محتلم, or that ghusl on the day of Jumu'ah is obligatory upon every person who has reached puberty, and that's agreed upon. So they say here the Prophet ﷺ said the ghusl on the day of Jumu'ah. He didn't say it has to do anything with the Salât. So after Jumu'ah, it's still the day of Jumu'ah up until Asr, and then from Asr until Maghrib it's still Jumu'ah and it's still daytime. So if you performed it after, you'd still be falling under this hadith. So they say that this relates it to the day and not to the Jumu'ah, not to the Salât. And then they mention the same hadith that we talked about, so both sides can use it. They say the hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha, that when the people would come and they would be covered in dust and sweat, because they would pass through the dusty areas and they would wear wool clothing. So they say that here the Prophet ﷺ said, لو اغتسلتم ليومكم هذا, or if only you had performed ghusl for this day of yours. So he didn't relate it to the Salât, he related it to the day itself. So they say this shows that it's related to the day. Had they performed it after, or even the night before, then they would still be following this hadith, because it doesn't mention anything about the Salât. And then they also mention the hadith that we talked about before, that the Prophet ﷺ said, حَقٌّ لِلَّهِ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ أَنْ يَغْتَسِلْ فِي كُلِّ 7 أَيَّامٍ يَغْسِلُ رَأْسَهُ وَجَسَدَهُ. Or that from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ said, it is a duty toward Allah upon every Muslim to perform ghusl once every 7 days by washing his head and his body, and that's agreed upon. And then they also mention another narration of this hadith where they say that it mentions every 7 days, every Jumu'ah. But this hadith, Allahu Alam, it's not authentic from the Prophet ﷺ. So what they say here is that all of these ahadith mention the day. They don't mention anything about the Salât. So if someone did it before the Salât, they would be following the hadith that say about the day. And if they did it after the Salât, they'd also be following it, or following under the hadith that mentioned the day. So they say that one doesn't actually disprove the other. One is just more specific, or one's a specific time for the ghusl. However, the ones who say that no, it relates to the Jumu'ah, to the Salât itself, they say that just because the word day is mentioned, the word in Arabic, often there's something that they call al-kull yadillu ala al-ba'd, or al-ba'd yadillu ala al-kull, or that meaning that a general phrasing, or using a word, a whole word, or a word indicating a whole thing, can be referring to one part of it. Or referring to one part of something can indicate the whole thing. And so they give examples of that. So from the Quran, an example that they give for part of something meaning the whole thing, they say when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discussed some of the kaffara, or some of the expiations for certain sins, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ, or the freeing of a neck. So what does it mean when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the type of expiation for a certain sin and says to free a neck? To free a slave. So if you just somehow just freed their neck, like, does it mean anything? It doesn't even have a meaning, but it indicates to free a person. But one part of the person was meaning the whole thing. And likewise the opposite. So they say that a part can indicate the whole thing as well. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, when He was talking about the kuffar gathering against the Muslimin, He said, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسِ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ. Or that when He said, those people, so referring to the Muslims at the time, the Sahaba, those people who the people said to them, or indeed those who the people said to them, the people have gathered against you. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions what the people had said to them, that the people had gathered against them. Had the whole world gathered against them at the time? No, there was people who weren't fighting them, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the people. So even though it was a part of them, the word for everyone was used for this specific thing. And so this shows that sometimes the word of the general word, so meaning the day, Jumu'ah as a whole, Yawmul Jumu'ah, that's referring to the whole day, it can be indicating a certain part of the day based on other evidence. So we know for a fact that it wasn't all the people, because there were people who weren't involved in the Ghazwa of Al-Ahzab. There were people who weren't involved. So we know based on the fact that people weren't involved, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ, it wasn't all the people, it was part of them. So likewise, they say, when the Prophet ﷺ said, on the day of Jumu'ah, it doesn't mean any time on Jumu'ah. It's indicated, or it's explained by the other hadith that say, whoever goes to Salât al-Jumu'ah and performs ghusl beforehand. So it means that they do it before the time and not the whole day. Likewise, and anyways, we can stop there for that. I mean, because really it's that proves the point, I guess. So if we look at all this, then the strongest opinion appears to be that it's for Salât al-Jumu'ah. It's not for the day. So the person would have to go to the Jumu'ah after having performed ghusl, and that the time is from the night as well. So because it doesn't necessarily mean that, because the word day can indicate the night as well. So if I say the person did something for 5 days straight, does it mean he did it in the day, he stopped at night, he did it in the day, stopped at night? Or does it mean it was 5 consecutive 24-hour periods, even though I use the word day. So the day can mean the whole thing, and it can also mean day as opposed to night. And an example they give of that is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Zakaria alayhi salatu wassalam, that he said, قَالَ رَبِّ اجْعَلْ لِي آيَةً قَالَ آيَتُكَ أَلَّا تُكَلِّمَ النَّاسَ ثَلَاثَ لَيَالٍ سَوِيًّا. Or that he said, O my Lord, appoint me a sign. So he said, your sign is that you shall not speak unto mankind for 3 nights straight. So meaning that, so he specified the nights here. And then elsewhere in the Quran discussing the same thing, he said, قَالَ رَبِّ اجْعَلْ لِي آيَةً قَالَ آيَتُكَ أَلَّا تُكَلِّمَ النَّاسَ ثَلَاثَةَ أَيَّامٍ إِلَّا رَمْزًا. Or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Zakaria, he said, O my Lord, make a sign for me. So he said, your sign is that you shall not speak to mankind for 3 days except with signals. So in one part it was referring to the night, and one part it was referring to the day. So these can be interchangeable depending on the evidence. So when the Prophet ﷺ said the day of Jumu'ah, it means the 24-hour period. So if someone did it the night before, and then they were still clean when they went to Jumu'ah, they don't have to do it again, as long as they're still clean. Because as we see, like ghusl from janaba, let's say you were 100% clean after. Like you went and you actually showered without the intention of ghusl. You just took a shower with soap and shampoo. Does that help you remove your janaba or not? No. Are you clean though?
Yeah.
So this shows that ghusl from janaba, making wudu from a hadath, it's not for cleanliness in and of itself, it's for a ritual act. Jumu'ah though, we see in the hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha and another hadith from Ibn Abbas that the point of it was to get people to be clean on the Jumu'ah. So it wasn't a ritual in and of itself. You're not removing a hadath or anything like this. So if the person made ghusl the night before and they were clean, and then they woke up and then they went to work or school or they stayed home and then they wanted to come to Jumu'ah, if they're still clean, they don't have to perform ghusl. They would only have to make sure they're on wudu, as opposed to ghusl from janaba or wudu from from any of the hadath or anything like this. So on this topic, the strongest opinion is that it's related to the Salât, that it indicates that the person should be clean when they come to the Salât, and it's not a ritual, it's more of a cleanliness aspect. So the person they can start it the night before, and as long as they're clean, then they should be fine and they don't have to redo it. But if they did it at Fajr, or even let's say after sunrise, and then they became filthy for whatever reason due to work, they should do it again, because its cleanliness is the part of, or the reason behind this ghusl. The next thing to talk about is what is the ruling on ghusl for those who don't attend Jumu'ah or don't have to attend Jumu'ah. Yeah.
Okay, I guess this topic's going to explain my questions.
Okay. So if we say that it's related to the Salât, then this specifies certain people. Because what if you're not going to the Salât because you're sick? What if you're not going because you're traveling? What if you're not going because you're a woman and it's not obligatory upon you? These types of things. What if you're in a place where there is no Jumu'ah? Or if we say it's for the day, does that mean it's for everyone, even if you're not going to Jumu'ah at all, or even if Jumu'ah is not obligatory upon you? So because of these disputes, the scholars, this led into a second dispute as well. So with regards to who has to actually perform it, one opinion is that it's anyone who intends to go to Jumu'ah, whether it's a man or a woman, whether they're traveling or not, whether they're an adult or a child. If you're attending the Jumu'ah itself, you have to perform ghusl, or it's recommended for you to perform ghusl. And that's the opinion of the Ahnâf and the Mâlikiyyah and the main Shâfi'î opinion. So what they use for this is the hadith that we mentioned already. So the one from Ibn Umar that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا جَاءَ أَحَدُكُمْ إِلَى الْجُمُعَةِ فَلْيَغْتَسِلْ. If one of you comes to the Jumu'ah, then let him make ghusl. So he's saying, if you come, make ghusl. So the understanding of that is, if you don't come, you don't have to make ghusl. Likewise, the hadith that we talked about as well from Abu Hurairah, that whoever performs ghusl, the ghusl of janaba, then comes to Jumu'ah early to the end of the hadith. So this shows that it's relating whoever does it and then comes to Jumu'ah. So our understanding of this is that whoever doesn't come to Jumu'ah doesn't have to perform or isn't recommended for him to perform ghusl on the Friday. So this is the first opinion. And then they mention a weak hadith from Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu that the Prophet ﷺ said, or it's attributed to him that he said, من أتى الجمعة من الرجال والنساء فليغتسل وإن لم يأتها فليس عليه غسل من الرجال والنساء. Or that it's narrated from the Prophet ﷺ that it's attributed to him that he said, whoever comes to the Jumu'ah from men or women, then let him perform ghusl. And whoever doesn't come from men or women doesn't have to perform ghusl. And that's narrated by Ibn Khuzaymah and Ibn Hibban. But it's this part about the women is weak, and Allahu Alam about the second part of the hadith, whether that's authentic or not. There seems to be some defect in it. The second is that it's only obligatory, or it's only recommended for males who are attending, even if they don't have to attend. Males who attend, even if they don't have to attend. So meaning that, let's say you were a male and you were traveling and you decided to go to Jumu'ah. You don't have to now because you're traveling, but it would be recommended on you because you're going, even if you don't have to go. So again, they relate it back to the Salât itself. And what they say, they say the same evidence, and that's the main Hanbalî opinion. So they say that it's the attendance only for males, though. The first opinion was the attendance, and it's anyone who attends. And that's again, like I said, the main Hanbalî opinion. The next is they say that whoever has to attend. So if it's obligatory upon you to attend, then you have to make it, even if you don't attend. Like, so let's say someone, it was obligatory upon him to attend, he was an adult, it was a male, he was a resident, he wasn't traveling, but he couldn't attend for some reason, like let's say he was in prison. Then it would be obligatory or recommended for him to perform ghusl still, because attending ghusl or attending Jumu'ah means you should perform ghusl. So you have two things on you that you should be doing: performing ghusl and attending Jumu'ah. The fact that you're stopped from attending Jumu'ah for whatever the reason is, doesn't mean the other thing would fall off of you. You still have to do it. Just like if someone has two obligations on them and one of them they can't perform for whatever reason, it doesn't mean the other one falls off. So they say that these are two things that has to be performed, or one has to be and one should be. If they can't do one of them, the other one is still required for them to do or recommended for them to do. And that's the opinion of some of the Shâfi'iyyah. The last opinion is, or the second last, is that it's on everyone, whether they're attending or not, whether they have to attend or not, a man or a woman, an adult or a child. And this is the opinion of Abû Thawr, and we said he's from the companions of Imam Shâfi'î, and some of the Shâfi'îs, and Ibn Hazm. To the point that Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah, even said it's obligatory upon women in their menstruation and their nifas, or their postpartum bleeding. So what they say is, they say that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-ghuslu yawm al-jumu'ah wajibun ala kulli muhtalim," or that ghusl on the day of Jumu'ah is obligatory upon every adult. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't differentiate between someone who's attending or not. He didn't differentiate between someone who it's obligatory on or not, between a man or a woman, an adult or a young adult. Also, he didn't differentiate between someone who was traveling or not. He didn't differentiate between someone who was in their menstruation or not. He just said, in general, it is obligatory upon every adult. And then he mentions the same hadith that we talked about before. And then the last is that it's only for those who have to attend. And if we look at all these evidences, and we look at what we talked about before, there's a direct tie between performing ghusl and attending Jumu'ah. So Allahu A'lam, the strongest opinion would be the opinion of the majority that we said at first. If you attend Jumu'ah, you should perform ghusl, whether you have to attend or not. So if you're a male and you're a resident, you have to attend, so you should perform it. If you're a male and you're traveling and you decide to attend Jumu'ah, you should also perform it as well, even though it's not obligatory on you to attend, because much of the discussion in the ahadith about ghusl of Jumu'ah relates to attending or being clean when you attend and these types of things. So if we say that that's one of the main reasons or the main reason for performing ghusl, this is present whether you have to attend or not, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're traveling or not, whether you're sick or not. All these types of things are still present in someone who's in that situation. So this is a discussion on the people who have to as opposed to those who don't have to attend Jumu'ah. Is that...
Yeah, most of it. But I still have a question about the hadith where the Rasul ﷺ said it's wajib on every person to do it on the day of Friday. This is authentic, so?
Yeah.
Is there another hadith contradicting?
Contradicting which part?
The wajib part.
There's one that we talked about, where it's a weak hadith.
I was out of town on that one.
It's a weak hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, من توضأ يوم الجمعة فبها ونعمة, or whoever performs wudu on Jumu'ah, then he's done good. ومن اغتسل فالغسل أفضل, or whoever performs ghusl, then it's better. So they say that this shows that it's a choice, but ghusl is better, but that's weak. They also they use the hadith from Umar where the Prophet ﷺ, or where Umar was giving the khutbah and Uthman came in. So they say the fact that Uthman came to the Salât even though he didn't perform ghusl, and Umar didn't make him leave or make him or tell him to go perform ghusl or anything like that, or Uthman didn't leave when he was stopped, shows that they understood it wasn't obligatory. And then they used the hadith from Aisha radiallahu anha where the people came to Jumu'ah and they were smelling, so the Prophet ﷺ said, if only you had performed ghusl for this day. So they say that it shows that it's more relating to cleanliness, and if you're clean then you don't have to perform. So there's those evidences and a few other ones that they use, that those who say it isn't obligatory use to say.
Authentic?
Yeah.
So the other one just clearly says wajib, right? So
Yeah.
maybe the other two, it's khalas, they're already there. It's too late.
What do you mean?
Like the one with Umar and Aisha, it was too late to tell Uthman to go back. It was too late to tell the people who already came to Jumu'ah when he said, if only you did ghusl.
Yeah.
Like, it's too late to tell them to go back. He's not going to tell them to go travel back to where you came from.
Right, and so the ones who say it is obligatory, they say this doesn't prove that it isn't obligatory, because they say, first of all, Umar did stop Uthman, and he rebuked him in front of the people even. So had it not been wajib, why would he have made a big deal out of it? And also they say that the one from Aisha, just because it's related to cleanliness, doesn't prove that it's not obligatory. So they say, so both sides actually use a lot of the same evidence. So like the hadith of Uthman and Umar, both sides use it. And then the other one, one side uses it to say that it's related to cleanliness, but the other ones say just because it might have started based on that, and the Prophet ﷺ obligated it because of that. And then they also use a hadith of Ibn Abbas where he was asked if it was wajib, and he said no. So they say, well, this shows the understanding of the Sahaba. So Allahu Alam, it's definitely not something that should be left, because of even if we say it's sunnah, it's something very highly recommended, and the evidence is very strong on the side to prove that it is obligatory.
Do you remember offhand who took which opinions? Like which madhahib?
Ibn Hazm was the only one who said it was obligatory, from the Zahiriyyah.
And the majority said it was...
The rest said it's recommended. Yeah. The next issue is, the author says, performing ghusl for the Eid prayers. So he says, scholars also encourage Muslims to perform ghusl on the Eid prayers, even though there is no authentic hadith to support this opinion. He says, it says in Al-Badr al-Munir, the hadith concerning performing ghusl for the Eids are weak, but there do exist good reports from the Sahaba. So this is all the author mentions, that it's recommended, there's nothing authentic from the Prophet ﷺ, and there is acceptable reports from the Sahaba. So based on this, exactly what the author mentioned, there is a dispute on whether or not the ghusl on the day of Eid, or the 2 days of Eid, whether it's recommended or not. So the vast majority say it is recommended. The Ahnâf and the Shâfi'îyyah and Hanâbilah and the Mâlikiyyah, they say that it is recommended. And what they use is some of the ahadith that the Prophet ﷺ, or that are attributed to the Prophet ﷺ but are weak. So they mention, there's a well-known hadith, but it's a weak hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ said about Jumu'ah, this is a day that Allah has made as an Eid for you, so perform ghusl. So this hadith is weak, but the way they use it is obvious. So if the Prophet ﷺ said that the reason you perform ghusl on Jumu'ah is because it's a day that Allah made as an Eid, then obviously the Eid day would be more deserving of performing ghusl because it's an actual Eid of the year as opposed to Jumu'ah being an Eid of the week. But again, this is a weak hadith, so it's not usable. Likewise, they use a mawdu' hadith or a fabricated hadith about performing ghusl on Jumu'ah and Arafah and the two Eids. And they use two weak hadith that mention that the Prophet ﷺ used to perform ghusl on the two Eids. And then lastly, they use a weak hadith about performing ghusl, or the Prophet ﷺ encouraging the Muslims to perform ghusl before they go out to the musalla on the day of Eid. So as the author mentioned, there's nothing authentic from the Prophet ﷺ on that topic. However, again, like he mentioned, there is acceptable narrations from the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ. So the first is a narration, it was narrated by Imam Malik rahimahullah in his Al-Muwatta. أن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما كان يغتسل يوم الفطر قبل أن يغدو. Or that Imam Malik narrated from Nafi' from Ibn Umar that he used to perform ghusl on the day of Al-Fitr before he would go out. And that's an authentic narration. It's actually what they call, or some of the ulama call, asah al-asanid, or the most authentic of the asanid is Malik from Nafi' from Ibn Umar. And the reason for that is Imam Malik is from the main imams of hadith and aqidah and fiqh. He was with Nafi' for a long time. He spent much of his life with him. And Nafi' is from the main imams of the tabi'een. And he spent much of his life with Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhuma. And then he was also, we know, from the main scholars of the Sahaba. So this is what they call asah al-asanid, or some of them say as-silsila al-dhahabiyya, or the golden chain, or stuff like this, because of how authentic that narration is, or those narrations are. So they mention this, and then they also mention a narration from Ali radiallahu anhu. It's from the tabi'i Zadan, that he said, سأل رجل عليا رضي الله عنه عن الغسل قال اغتسل كل يوم إن شئت. Or that Zadan asked, or said that Ali radiallahu anhu was asked about ghusl. So he said, perform ghusl every day if you want. فقال لا الغسل الذي هو الغسل. Or he said, no, the ghusl which is the ghusl. So meaning he's not talking about showering or just cleaning oneself, he means actual shar'i ghusl. فقال يوم الجمعة ويوم عرفة ويوم النحر ويوم الفطر. So he said, so Ali radiallahu anhu replied, he's telling him obviously the time, so he said the day of Jumu'ah, the day of Arafah, the day of Al-Fitr, or sorry, the day of Al-Nahr, so the slaughtering, meaning Eid al-Adha, and Yawm al-Fitr, so the Eid al-Fitr. And that's narrated by Imam al-Shâfi'î in Kitâb and it's an authentic narration from him as well. So they say we have authentic from two Sahaba. One is Ali, and he's from the scholars of the Sahaba, and he's from the Khulafa al-Rashideen, and he's from the Ashr al-Mubashirin bil-Jannah. So all we know his knowledge, and we know his knowledge of the Sunnah. So he's saying with his actual statements, it's not something he was performing where someone could say, well, maybe he did it because of this, or maybe he did it because of this. He was telling someone, these are the times that you do it. And we have from Ibn Umar, who we know was from the scholars of the Sahaba, and we know his enthusiasm for following the Sunnah. So he used to do it out on these days. So they say we have two of the main scholars of the Sahaba performing it, or telling other people to do it, or that this is a time when it should be done. And then lastly, some of them mention the qiyas or analogy on Jumu'ah. So they say both of them are a big gathering for Salât. So it should be done. If it's done for this one, it should be done for this one. And the second opinion, it's not attributed specifically to anyone, but it was mentioned by, his name is Abu al-Walid al-Baji, who was from the Maliki scholars, he said that there was a dispute on it. So he mentioned a dispute on it, and this is because what they would say is that there's no evidence from the Prophet ﷺ to do so. So of all of the times there was Salat, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr, how come we don't have anything authentic from the Prophet ﷺ performing it, or telling people to perform it, or being asked about it, or anything like this? So these are the two opinions, and Allahu A'lam, if we look at the two, then we would say it's better to do so, because it's the understanding of the Sahaba. We wouldn't attribute it to the Sunnah, but we would say because the Sahaba did it, it's unlikely that they would say it should be done on these days if there was absolutely nothing for it. And but at the same time, we wouldn't put it at the same level of Jumu'ah or any of the times where it's clearly recommended or we have clear evidence from the Prophet ﷺ. And the last thing to talk about for tonight is the timing of performing the ghusl on the Eid. So again, we have nothing authentic from the Prophet ﷺ. And if there was a dispute on Jumu'ah ghusl when we do have from the Prophet ﷺ, then obviously there's going to be a bigger dispute about Salat al-Eid when we have nothing from the Prophet ﷺ. So the first opinion is that it should be done after Fajr. And then that's the opinion of the Hanâbilah. The second say that it can be done before Fajr. So meaning you could do it, and then they dispute on what time of the night could you do it. And that's the opinion of the Mâlikiyyah, the Shâfi'îyyah, and a narration from Imam Ahmad. So they say that because we don't have anything from the Prophet ﷺ, how can we then say that it has to be done after a certain time or before a certain time, when the very basis or legislation of the issue itself, we don't have evidence for? So Allahu A'lam, we would say that as long as the person is clean when they go to the Eid, we can't say it has to be done after Fajr, because if for Jumu'ah we don't have any clear evidence, what about the Eid? How can we then say if you do it before Fajr, it's invalid or you haven't performed the Sunnah? So this is with regards to the timing. And then with regards to the day or the Salat, like we said before, is the ghusl for the day or is it for the Salat? Those who say it's for the Salat are the Hanâbilah, and those who say that it's for the day are the Mâlikiyyah and the Shâfi'iyyah. So they say that if someone performed it after the Salat, they would still have reached the Sunnah, because all of the Eid is a day when you want to be clean. We don't just dress up or put perfume on and these types of things just for the Salat and then nothing after. There's still gatherings and visitings and people getting together and these types of things after the Salat as well. So the person, if he hadn't performed it before the Eid, he could still do it after, but it would be better so that he's clean when he goes to the Salat. So inshallah, we'll stop there next week, on Thursday we'll get into, the author mentions performing ghusl after washing a dead body. And so we'll talk about some of the ahkam and some of the issues related to that. Wallahu a'lam.